all the people we've heard today share the one thing that I want to talk about, and that's recognition. It's interesting that we all crave it. We all want to be recognised by those around us. But the bit that I want to talk about is about corporations and the fact that they want to be recognised and what they do to be recognised, and is it in the right direction? I want to start with the premise that unique should be taken out of the dictionary. But apart from us individually, I can't think of too much that's unique. Been to the supermarket of recent times, and you see the creativity of industry. Now, it should be very easy to go into business, because if you want to go into the cracker business, there's clearly a formula. You know, the decoration on top of the crackers is optional. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And I'm working a lot in China at the moment, but I learnt something from the Chinese recently, and that's this, which means we should redesign, which I think we should really redesign a lot of these sort of control marks that we have. But, you know, this isn't a new thing. I mean, I think we all know this guy. Right? He's pretty familiar, but I'm not sure if you knew that I think he actually sort of knocked this off from somebody else. But even if you think this is original, you've got to go back to the start of civilization to really appreciate how these brands have grown. And I bet, I mean, everybody knows what this is, right? I bet you never knew that it actually started in Taiwan. Which, I mean, it's a really good idea. It's a really good idea. Now, it was Margaret Mead that said, always remember that you're absolutely unique, just like everyone else. Which is very true. Now, just to sort of consolidate this theory, I was working with a company in Taiwan, and we were pretty excited. This was a global venture to become a national or international brand. And we said, well, hang on a second, you've got to have competitors. Who are the competitors? Now, these are the competitors. Now, all these companies have spent multi-millions, if not billions of dollars to look different. Now, there is the blue suit theory, and that is that anyone with a blue suit runs a corporation and the best colour at the golf club is blue. You're not going to do anything too radical. But if you look at these 6 companies, no change in the colour. All the lifestyle photography is interchangeable, and if you look down the typefaces, out of 6 companies, there's only 4 typefaces. Might seem a bit strange. But if they were the little guys, you might understand the sort of blue envy. Now, it's interesting because the company I went to work with had actually just done its identity program with a company in the United States. Now, they tried very hard. They were the 3rd company to adopt this support typeface. They had a name you couldn't pronounce. And an Australian pronouncing this name is pretty cool. You can do it many ways, and some of them sound obscene. But they'd also chosen a colour that was horribly close to that blue spectrum. Now, as it turned out, the colour that was recommended to them was a pink. But with no women on the board, that wasn't going to happen. In desperation to make this work, they used this butterfly as a sort of surrogate symbol. But we knew what was going to happen is that all the technology companies were talking in straight lines, right angles. These guys wanted to talk about the enjoyment that technology would bring to our lives. And they wanted to talk about how the new world was going to feel if you could join it all together. So we set out on a mission to kill the butterfly because we couldn't see any possible reason that this was an appropriate thing that would represent the organisation. But what we did notice were the very soft lines, and unlike the right angles and the straight lines, this was a new way of talking, and a softer way of talking. But we knew the ultimate goal and the ultimate test would be when all these companies got together, we would be the least known and we would be exactly the same colours as the others. What we did was we took this idea of the butterfly and injected a texture into the colour to at least separate us. The ideal world, of course, would have taken us to a different colour. This kind of opened up a whole new world because what we had was a completely flexible trademark. We brought back the colour of the pink. I should mention also that the brief here was not to change anything but make us look completely different. Don't change the logotype, don't change the colour, don't really change anything, but we'd be very comfortable with that, but we do want to look different. This enabled us to run out and get all the other butterflies and get all the other colours. And it's taken us on a 14-year journey of evolution where the identity has continued to move and move further away from those other 6 companies. It's interesting too because it created a language that would allow them to change conversations and still be recognised. So when they couldn't run the trademark and they couldn't say who they were, the opportunity to still identify themselves, particularly in locations where their trademark was close by, was pretty handy. I don't know how many of you would remember the late Richard Pratt, but he said to me one day, and this is probably 20 years ago, there'll only be 2 things that will matter in business into the future: the way you provide the service or product and how you deliver that. And the last bit of it is about how you look while you do it. If we all subscribe to the fact that products and services are essentially the same today, the only way to make yourself visible is through visual means. Everyone has a story, and it's amazing how many people will sort of say to me, "Oh, but we don't really have a story." Everybody's got a story. I sort of go back to, I don't know how many people remember these trademarks because none of them exist today as they were. Of course, Pan Am's gone. When they took the wings off the kangaroo for Qantas, it was, for me, a great shame. The flying kangaroo was our airline. And the one on the right is a Centaur that was used by Air India. It's interesting because most airlines today have stripes down the side of the planes, taking off, landing. Some designer actually rationalised that this Centaur could be turned into this graphic, which ultimately turned into this aircraft. Someone once said that the important thing was to not obtain new facts, but actually find different ways of looking at them. So I just want to show you something where nothing here is new. And I want to sort of emphasise this, that what you're going to see existed. So we had this symbol, but we also had an airline that was essentially red and white, the same as everybody else, particularly those airlines that flew on the same routes, in a country where colour meant something completely different. I mean, you want passion and colour, you go to India or you go to Mexico. So instead of saying this airline should be corporate red, what we said is we embrace the whole family. We collect all the reds and we celebrate the colour. The other thing was that in India, colour's in reverse. I never realised this till I started to look at the smaller things, but it's the people who wear the colour. And the backgrounds are incredibly neutral. Here the little black dress is pretty popular and the dark blue suit. And all the colour in our environment is in the environment itself. They also know how to celebrate, and their idea was to celebrate life. And it's kind of, you look at the way they celebrate, and every day of the year there's a celebration. To know the colours of celebration, all we had to do was go back and look at the people. Now this photograph just removes the background, so it's very obvious where the colour is. And we said, how do we connect with the communities? How do we tell them our story? So we stayed with those things that made the people different. We stayed with their clothing. We said, is it possible that we could actually attribute different elements of fabric and different elements of pattern to different parts of the country? Working with a cultural expert, we aligned different patterns with every part of the culture in India to denote that. We graphically reduced it to black and white, reconnected it as a map, and created what we call the fabric of India. Now, this meant that we could have everybody attached to one thing. This was a giant flag, but everybody had a connection. We could pull it forward and emphasise one part, or we could push it away and look at a different part. Then you say, well, what would you do with this? How would you apply this? And of course, you say, well, let's stay in India. How would they do it? Whoops, snake. Some things don't fly. They have a way of applying pattern, and all we had to do was take that, put it on the aircraft. Now, this hasn't taken off yet, no puns intended. And there are a number of political reasons why it hasn't. We made it to painting the planes and got grounded. Another story. But it's really interesting that if you look inside, the story that you have is often made up of things that you take for granted, but to other people they're different. And the advantage we have as designers and strategists is we come in clean, we see it without the baggage. I think most corporations are trying for four things: recognition, creating a relationship, wanting respect, and wanting that re-engagement or that repetition with those people they want to talk to. The key to finding the real identity is simply to make the business strategy visible. That's the goal that we set ourselves. Some 4 years ago, I had an extraordinary happening. I met a client that I've never been able to speak to. I've worked 4 years with this client. He speaks Mandarin, I speak English, and everything's through a translator. He's also one of the most remarkable people that I've come across because he has a goal to do good. And we've seen remarkable people today who are doing good. This guy is the China equivalent. He derives products from bees, which is appropriate also from our last speaker. This is the products that he had in the market. They look the same as everybody else. How did we get involved? This is a history of identity for him. And if we go to the bottom there, the little green bee at the bottom was symbolic of his business. But he also knew that they're about to make new products to combine herbal products with the bee products. Thousands of years of Chinese medicine could be useful in creating things that would help arrest diabetes, for instance. So again, it was sort of a little bit like the BenQ company. It was, really don't change it, we still want the bee, but can you make it different? So we kind of said we had to go from this bee to bee and plants. We have to go from this and find a new way to talk about the spirit of the bee. So some of the products. Now, this is part one. So I'm going to talk about combining a few things. The second thing was they had bee products, and what colour are bee products? Black and yellow. So he said, well, we still have to have those. And the problem is that everybody has those. Everybody in the bee business has black and yellow stripes. So we set out to say, how could we own the black and yellow stripes? And we looked at ways of changing the rhythm of those, making them hard, making them soft, changing the spacing. We said, well, if we look closely at the bee, maybe we could take the textures of the bee into the stripes and actually make them ownable trademarks, which means that we could actually combine these in different ways to create different outcomes. These have now been applied to product in a pretty exciting journey. At the same time, today there's something like over 100 million diabetics in China. 200 million by 2020, if the statistics are right. And he said, we have to look at a diabetic range of products. Where do we go? We go back to the source. We go back to the blood cells. Does anybody know this blue circle is the international symbol for diabetes? Does anybody? Please say yes if you know. This is the best kept secret in the world. I've not met anybody that knows. So we said, okay, we have to stay with those green colours, the blood cells and things like that. What do we do with that? We create a language. And our client wanted us to have a cross, but I desperately didn't want a cross because of the ethical nature of these products. So we were able to combine those two things, the bee and the cross, to actually give ourselves a workable trademark. But it also had to then extend to other products to allow the family to be completed. What we had was 3 different languages within this corporation. We had the bee and the bee elements and the organic elements. We had the bee stripes, and we had the blood cells. One day, and I know that I'll upset a number of architects because I've managed to do that most of my life. They're pretty easy to upset. My client asked me actually an opinion on their new factory, on the new headquarters for the building. What about a bee museum? And said, look, if you thought of these buildings as just boxes, what would you do with this? Now, I'm a great believer that corporations should use everything, that there's no such thing as a separate budget to promote the brand, because the brand is everything the company does. So we said, okay, what should we do here? We should take the language of the company, take the language of the products, and apply it to these boxes. And we added the museum, which was the little dome in the middle there. And actually then create a sort of network of buildings. Now this has been modified. It goes actually into production in February. But it's interesting that the whole culture of the organisation can be summed up in the architecture or in the buildings. And that every dollar that's spent within that corporation is about brand building, no matter what functional benefits it also has and functional operations. Was a Vern Ball that said, though no one can go back and make a brand new start. Anyone can start from now and make a brand new ending. Today, business has to be flexible. Today, business has to be able to move and signal change very quickly. And what they build is systems to be consistent and rubber stamped and boring. We've got 2 slides now. Resist following the market leader. Remember why you went into business. People forget. The nicest thing ever said to me by a client is, you gave us the confidence to be who we thought we were. And as Oscar Wilde said, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Thank you very much.